You could read every New York Times or Washington Post story ever written about Donald Trump, and not one will say he's very smart, but he is. So just talk more about there's different kinds of intelligence. How is he smart?
Well, he's smart at 3 or 4 levels, some of which I just literally don't have. One is he's essentially intuitive. That is, he absorbs an enormous amount of information. He is the most existential politician I've ever seen. I mean, Nelson Mandela would be probably the closest parallel. Everything Trump does is in the moment. He is totally engaged, totally involved, and he's sort of schizophrenic, and that part of him is thinking strategically, while the other part is totally engaged with you. And so he absorbs stuff, and he's absorbing stuff all the time. I mean, when occasionally I have a conversation with him, I realize that there's 3 or 4 conversations going on simultaneously in one conversation, because he's thinking about this, and then he's overthinking about that, and things just flow. He is.
So let me just stop you there, because I just want to put a button on this, because it's so important. One way he's intelligent, you're saying, is he has the capacity to think in the moment, talk in the moment, but be thinking about other things and kind of connecting them all up and processing them. Sorry, go ahead. Second.
And I think somewhere, and I think unless you understand this even better than I do, because you're a New Yorker, and you went to school in Boston, which I picked up the other day, I thought was great. Moving from, people don't get this, moving from Queens to Manhattan is impossible. Nobody in the Manhattan elites is going to accept some newcomer from Queens who's brash and loud and rising. And so he spent his entire formative years being an outsider and wanting to be an insider. And I think finally concluding he ain't ever going to be an insider. So he would just get to be so big, they would like to be inside with him. And I think there's a very key part of what drives him is that.
How does that speak to intelligence? Because I want to stay on that. Does that speak to intelligence?
Yeah, because think about it. He had to sharpen all of his skills, whatever he thought he knew coming out of Queens. He had to learn a whole new world, a whole new system. He describes some of this in his 2 best books, The Art of the Deal and The Art of the Comeback. And there's one line when he says that he was going to redo the building, which I think is Trump Tower, and they were going to try to keep the Art Deco front. And the New York Times loved it and was nice to him until the engineer said, that's $3 million extra. At which point Trump said he didn't like Art Deco that much. At which point the New York Times attacked him for 3 straight days. Well, he said the lesson he learned was he had lots of people suddenly call him and say, I didn't know you were doing condominiums. And his conclusion was any media beats no media.